On a mysterious island south of Metru Nui, the horrid being known as Kazami is hammering away at a machine that will change his universe forever. The machine, now nearly completed, was of exquisite design, easily Kazami's best work. Its purpose, however, would prove cataclysmic to the Matoran universe when activated. The machine was designed to detect artifacts of power from within alternate universes, after which it would extract these artifacts by sending them through a dimensional rift back to Kazami's lab. With this machine, he could become the strongest being in the Matoran universe. All that was left to do was activate it. A shrill voice cries out to its master.
He's going to activate it!
Let him activate it. He won't be able to handle the power anyway. It will destroy him.
If we don't stop him, he'll destroy that entire universe. You must stop him!
There was a flash of light as a rift opened next to the head of the shrill-voiced servant. A shard of metal spun through it, and out through another rift, taking the servant's head off in the process.
You mustn't tell others what they must do. You had overstayed your welcome in my realm anyway, useless thing.
The master summoned another rift below the servant's limp, lifeless body, disposing it to who knows where. The being then turned back and looked through a rift at Kazami's island.
He'll do.
Kazami stared at his creation. After a quick double check, the machine was complete.
Finally, absolute power just a pull of a lever away. After I take over Montanui's body, I'll make him repair the stinking Matoran. Then we'll see how he likes it.
He walked over to the activation panel, grasped the lever, and without hesitation, pulled it. The machine whirred to life. The central turbine started to glow with electricity, and pulses of energy started to course back and forth through coils along the sides. Sparks went flying, and the walls and floor shook. Then, a beam of green energy shot from the front of the machine, stopping in midair about 10 feet from it. Space turned to liquid as the beam tunneled through the multiverse. The air around the end of the beam seemed to boil, getting more and more intense. Then, the Master intervened. A rift suddenly opened in front of Kazami's machine. Startled, Kazami went to deactivate it, but the controls stopped responding. He desperately searched for a way to power down the machine as it continued to fire its beam into the mysterious rift.
Shame, isn't it?
A voice said from behind Kazami. He whirled around, only to see another, smaller rift suspended in midair, staring back at him like a single, unmoving eye.
So much work, all for nothing.
Who are you?
I am the cause of your predicament. You tried to tread on my territory. I don't appreciate that. Mortals like you cannot possess such power. I just saved you, and this universe, from the destruction you were about to bring.
You stole my power from me. I created that rift. Now give it back to me!
The talking rift rose above Kazami, expanding in size.
Watch yourself. The last thing that told me what to do was decapitated.
A chain flew from the rift and wrapped around one of Kazami's hands.
I am the only reason you mortals even have the ability to manipulate rifts. For I am the keeper of the multiverse, and all trans-dimensional transactions go through me.
The chain around Kazami's arm jerked, pulling him straight up through the talking rift. As it closed behind him, Kazami's machine continued to fire its beam into the Master's rift, the other end of which was now somewhere deep in the depths of space. Kazami fell flat on his face after emerging from the other side of the talking rift. He opened his eyes and jumped. All he saw was void, with thousands of eyeball-like rifts opening and closing all around him. He stood on an invisible surface, and 6 feet away sat a dark figure on an ornate, golden throne. Kazami couldn't get a good look at the figure, but he could make out the shape of a Kanohi Almach on its head.
Welcome to my realm. Cozy, isn't it? Having the entire multiverse at your fingertips really makes for a fine living situation. I have an opportunity for you.
Montanui's sensors suddenly went haywire. He was flying barely a light year from the shattered Spherus Magna when an ill-timed anomaly had completely distracted him from his important research. A rift had suddenly opened next to him, with a strange energy beam firing out of it. At the end of the beam, another rift was slowly forming.
What could this be? This is most unusual.
Montanui attempted to scan the two rifts to find out what had caused them. The more stable rift led straight back to Karzani's island, but the other led to so many different locations that Montanui's instruments crashed almost instantly.
Blast. I've never seen anything this strange before. Something like this shouldn't be left unattended. My gravitational beams should be able to close these rifts, but one of them is unstable. It might prove to be difficult.
Montanui thought. Quickly, he closed the stable rift without any trouble or signs of resistance, almost as if it had wanted to be closed. Suddenly, the unstable rift began to pulsate violently and expand at an incredible speed. Montanui lurched back as the rift increased in size until it rose to roughly half his height. The Great Spirit was awestruck. Montanui floated there, speechless, as the boiling rift spat out a single tiny object. Montanui scanned it, and after a second of delay, his heads-up display was overloaded with energy readings and information on the tiny object. He had never seen something that small contain such valuable data.
Incredible! The rift has retrieved an object of immense power. What an interesting find indeed. Maybe this artifact will help me on my mission to recombine Spherus Magna.
The rift, however, was just getting started. Another tiny artifact came out. Montanui scanned it and retrieved a similar result. Then another emerged, and another, and another. Montanui became suspicious, but that feeling was quickly dwarfed by what happened next. The rate at which the rift was retrieving these powerful objects was increasing exponentially. Now it was spinning out at least 2 of these super powerful objects per second.
This is too much. If anyone with ill intentions found this rift, they could conquer the entire universe in a day. I'll definitely have to close it, but I can't handle all these artifacts alone.
Montanui sent a distress signal to his most loyal followers.
Hand of Artaka, I need you.
Cardanui was suddenly abuzz of activity. Montanui's message was immediately put on high priority, and the Hand of Artaka scrambled to work. Knowing this was a mission of dire consequence, they called upon their best Toa team. Helrix, Toa of Water, the first and most experienced Toa ever created. Nomi, Toa of Peace, a recently transformed Toa with mysterious barrier manipulation abilities. Regron, Toa of Gravity, the military general of the Hand of Artaka. Shellock, Toa of Iron, a masterful swordsman. Kafu, Toa of Stone, an extremely powerful yet precise warrior. Glace, Toa of Ice, an intelligent tactical mastermind. Ajax, Toa of Air, an expert at stealthy and speedy reconnaissance. They gathered their weapons and equipment and boarded an airship. The airship took off and headed toward the far corner of Cardanui. There, Montanui opened a portal that allowed the airship to fly out of Montanui's giant robotic body. The 7 Toa were shocked by what they saw next. Montanui was firing his gravitational beams into a massive rift that was spewing small clouds from its opening. The clouds, however, were not mere space dust. They were made up of super powerful objects. Montanui had a horrified expression on his face, for no matter how hard he tried, the rift was not only not closing, but growing.
Gather up all these objects, quickly, before they spill out into space. The rift is unstable. If I take my attention off it for a second, it'll expand exponentially.
Helrix nodded and turned to her team.
Nomi, do you remember your training?
I do. Why do you ask?
I need you to make a barrier around the rift and Montanui.
Nomi recoiled at the sound of the order. She had barely used her powers before this, and something of that caliber sounded impossible.
I can't make one that big. It's impossible.
It's possible. I know it is. You just need to focus and trust in your own power.
Helrix turned to the rest of her team.
We are all going to help gather the artifacts and protect Nomi. She needs to concentrate on keeping the barrier up. Ajax, Regron, and Shellock will do the brunt of the gathering. I, Kafu, and Glace will pilot the speeders around and transport the objects up to the airship. Is that a plan?
Everyone nodded and immediately set to work. Kafu, Helrix, and Glace all regrouped at the airship and deployed speeders with vacuum hoppers trailing behind them to gather the artifacts. Regron and Shellock immediately started using their elemental powers to gather up heaps of artifacts at once, and Ajax flew around at supersonic speed gathering them by hand. Nomi took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and stretched her arms out in front of her. The air around her illuminated, and a glowing barrier orb formed in her hands. She concentrated hard, and it slowly grew to her height. Her muscles tensed up, and she cast her arms forward, flinging the orb right into the center of the action. With intense effort, she whipped her arms back to either side again, causing the orb to rapidly expand around the rift, Mononui, the Toa, and the artifacts. Her eyes began glowing blindingly white as she strengthened the walls of the orb, stopping any artifacts from escaping into space. Helrix urged her team to work quickly, as there was no telling how long Nomi could keep the shield up. At first, the gathering was easy. The speeders rode fast and true, scooping up hundreds of artifacts before needing to be emptied out into the airships. This continued for several minutes before the Toa realized, no matter how many loads of artifacts they collected, the amount floating around them never decreased. If anything, it was increasing. Helrix paused to look around. The rift was dumping thousands of artifacts now, and was beginning to pulsate even more violently. Suddenly, a laser blast flew by Helrix, followed up by several more aimed at her fellow Toa.
Whoa!
Regron shouted from a distance.
Where's all this hostility coming from?
Helrix's eye caught a large, oddly shaped object lurking in the distance. It was hard to see against the darkness of space, but it appeared to be moving on its own. A bolt of energy was launched out of the strange thing, which struck Helrix square in the chest before she could react. Shellock and Ajax noticed, racing over to her side. Helrix was dazed. She felt a splitting pain in her head, like a chunk of it had just been ripped out, though Shellock assured her she looked fine. Helrix slowly rose to her feet, pointing Shellock and Ajax toward the source of the blast.
Stay away, Toa. The mask is mine. It remains bonded to me, as I am to old Fenrak here.
The crazed being shouted.
Where am I, anyway? What did you do to me?
We have no idea what you're talking about, Strange One. All we know is you attacked our leader, and that's unacceptable.
Shellock said nobly.
Prepare to die.
We'll see about that, Toa. I, the mighty Vezon, will not be defeated so easily.
Vezon lunged toward Shellock. With that, the fight began. Vezon struggled to keep up with the skill of Shellock's swordsmanship, only narrowly managing to hold his own with Fenrak at his side. Ajax jumped in, soon getting the idea to use several of the nearby artifacts against the insane Skakti. However, the fight turned to the worse when Fenrak knocked Ajax back at the same time Vezon used his so-called Spear of Separation to disarm Shellock and corner him. Ajax turned around, looking for anything Shellock could use to parry Vezon's finishing blow. She found her answer, a spiky pitch-black blade floating nearby.
Shellock, here!
Ajax shouted as she lobbed the sword to her Toa brother. Shellock caught it and brought the blade close to his chest, blocking Vezon's attack. He twisted the blade, knocking Vezon's spear to the side, followed up with one heavy swing aimed directly at Fenrak. The giant spider was cleaved in two as a flaming red mist poured from the blade. Vezon screeched in pain as his pet was severed from his body. Shellock immediately silenced his foe with the powerful artifact, separating his head from his shoulders with one clean swipe. Shellock and Ajax paused, staring in awe at the sword's power. They collected the Spear of Separation in Vezon's head, which was still fused to the mask he cared so much about, and then turned their attention back toward their fellow Toa. They noticed their friends were also locked in combat with similar beings, and immediately rushed to their aid. Suddenly, there were enemies everywhere. The rift was not only spitting out artifacts, but various powerful beings as well, which the Toa were now desperately trying to fend off. Kafu had retreated to where Nomi was floating, defending her all by himself. He was punching back unusual Rahi beasts when an artifact whizzed by him, narrowly missing his head. The clouds of artifacts floating through space were beginning to act strange, flying on unusual patterns at various speeds. The rift was looking strange as well. The Toa were so busy holding off waves of enemies that they had not noticed that the rift was still growing. The edge of the enormous rift was close to intersecting with the walls of Nomi's barrier now. Someone needed to warn her, but the Toa didn't dare take their attention off the enemies. The artifacts were flying so fast at this point that they were doing more damage to the enemies than the Toa were. The Toa took cover as storms of artifacts tore the area to pieces. Then, a low rumble emitted from the rift as the speed at which it was widening increased, finally intersecting with the edges of the barrier. Nomi screamed as the barrier was split through billions of universes. She passed out from the shock, and the barrier fell. All the Toa immediately rushed over to her. They shook her, desperately trying to wake her up. The artifacts were moving so fast now that there would be no stopping them if any flew out into space. Then came the moment that would change the entire universe forever. A gigantic, glowing sphere slowly began emerging from the rift, which had now grown much taller than Motunui. Motunui instinctively scanned the object and quickly realized that it was not an artifact. It was a planet that was torn from the multiverse itself. The data gathered from the planet showed it was nearly identical in both size and shape to Spherus Magna, although it did not resemble it in appearance. The artifact clouds were now reacting to the sudden change in magnetic fields created by the new planet. They bent back towards it and began falling through its atmosphere like a meteor shower. Nomi suddenly lurched back upwards and resumed her original position. Something about her was different, however. She didn't say anything or make a single sound to acknowledge the other Toa, and her entire body was glowing blindingly white. She instantly brought the barrier back up, much larger and stronger than it originally was. Hesitantly, Helrix and her team tried talking to her, but an intense heat was starting to emanate from her, and she was not responding.
I think she's going Nova!
Glaze shouted. There was nothing the Toa could do but retreat and continue trying to collect the artifacts. At this point, the massive planet was almost completely through. Motunui could tell that the rift was releasing a huge amount of energy to push its payload, and if it was weak enough after the planet moved through, he may be able to close it. Suddenly, a flare of energy erupted from the rift, finally propelling the glowing planet out of its original universe. It was exactly what Motunui needed. He focused his gravity beams on the edges of the now weakened rift, and with one final push, he was able to reverse its gravitational flow. The rift folded in on itself, sucking a significant portion of the artifacts back in, until finally crumpling into nothing. They had succeeded. The Toa gathered the remainder of the artifacts as fast as they could, using the speeders and Shellock and Regron's combined elemental powers. After a while, their task was completed, and the Toa returned to Nomi to tell her that she could bring the barrier down. But when they got there, only a small, glowing orb remained where Nomi had been floating. Helrix approached the orb gingerly.
Nomi? Is that you?
Helrix whispered. The second she stopped talking, the massive barrier surrounding them all collapsed. The little orb floated there for a few seconds, then fizzled out and disappeared. Nomi was gone. The Toa spent some time mourning their fallen sister. All of them besides Helrix had barely known her, and the small amount of time they had working together was all they had to remember her by. Helrix felt the worst. It was her command that caused Nomi to die. But without her, the mission would likely have been a complete failure, so those few frustrating months of training Helrix put Nomi through hadn't been for nothing. The Toa returned to the airships, setting course for the new planet. They took inventory of the artifacts they obtained along the way. When they landed on the surface, they were approached by a terrified-looking crowd. It was there they discovered the planet's name, Luna Magna. The local population had a monarchy, the king of which, a Toa of air named Gringat, was not happy. They tried to explain what happened. The rift had apparently stolen their kingdom's legendary artifact, a moondial called the Luna Dial. Helrix checked the inventory of the airships and found an artifact matching the Luna Dial's description. She proudly retrieved the Luna Dial and showed it to Gringat. His reaction proved that this was the right artifact. Angrily, he swiped it from Helrix's hands and began to storm away, but then stopped and looked back. He pointed at the Toa and shouted, "All of you are never to return here again, both you and your so-called Great Spirit. From here on out, the planet Luna Magna is closed off to any outsiders." With that, he turned back around and disappeared into the crowd. Helrix and her team obeyed the king's demands and returned to the airships. Iax was waiting there for Helrix, cradling something in her arms.
I found this little one slithering through a pile of artifacts. She must have been scooped up by one of the speeders during those last moments of artifact gathering.
In her arms, she held a small, armored, snake-like creature. It looked up at Helrix and purred. The frail little thing had been through all that chaos and survived, and for some reason, Helrix felt a strange connection to the creature. She looked back up to Iax.
I'll take care of her. After losing Nomi, I can't leave the poor thing out here to fend for itself. It would never survive on its own. That would be nice,
Iax responded, handing the creature to Helrix.
If we Toa cannot respect all living things, who can we expect to respect us?
The two Toa entered the airship, which flew back out into space. Once they returned to the Hand of Artaka headquarters, the team was tasked with distributing a small percentage of the collected artifacts around the Matoran universe. After that, all remaining artifacts were to be stored in a heavily guarded underground bunker at the Hand's headquarters. Finally, the 6 Toa went to get some rest. They had a lot of work ahead of them. Motunui was hesitant to leave Luna Magna. He had already learned a lot just from a few hours analyzing the planet and its population. The Matoran on Luna Magna shared many familiarities with the Matoran inside Motunui, except there were a few anomalies. Each Matoran on Luna Magna had traces of an unknown light energy locked within them, and the same energy was present all throughout the planet itself. As well as that, data regarding the distribution of the population's elemental powers was also different. Stone, ice, and iron were the most common elemental abilities on Luna Magna, and all other elements occurred only rarely. All of this was extremely fascinating to Motunui, but he could not remain long. The Luna Magnians were already annoyed at his presence enough. Reluctantly, Motunui began to fly away from the planet. As he did, however, he noticed a blip on his scanners. Not too long ago, they had picked up traces of a single Makuta on the surface of Luna Magna. Realizing this was unusual, Motunui risked a few more seconds to take a closer look, and was shocked. There was indeed a Makuta on Luna Magna, and it was attacking 2 Matoran on the surface while a Toa of Ice was desperately trying to defend them. The Great Spirit didn't know where the Makuta came from, but he assumed that it must have escaped from his body. Motunui had originally created the Makuta species, and he would not stand by while a rogue one invaded Luna Magna. He reached down to the 2 Matoran and gently lifted them away from the fight with a gravity beam. After the Matoran were safe, the Makuta vanished. Motunui spoke to the 2 Matoran.
Don't worry, little ones. You're safe now.
Contemplating his next actions very carefully, he realized this could very well be the last chance he had to continue his study of Luna Magna. The data gathered from this new planet was the most valuable he had retrieved in decades, and he held 2 of its citizens in the palm of his hand. Motunui realized what he was thinking, looking to the 2 Matoran solemnly. They could very well be his best hope of discovering how to recombine Spirus Magna in the future. Reluctantly, Motunui took the 2 Matoran and placed them in pods which recorded and wiped their memories. New memories were then artificially created for the 2 Matoran, their armor colors were changed, and they were placed amongst similar Matoran within the Matoran universe. The first Matoran, a Matoran of Iron, was placed with a small band of renegade Fee Matoran on the island of Stelt, and the other, a Matoran of Ice, was placed in Kometru. These Matoran's names were Knoxus and Matoro.